This is Lily Town Williams. My first time to do my YouTube channel from Scotland. Overseas trip lasted already 2 weeks already in Italy. If you follow me on Twitter and the social media, we had a great tour. And now back, first time come to Scotland. Weather here is quite different. In Sicily, I was wearing t-shirt and shorts. Here I got today bought this cashmere and Scotland hat and the scarf because I was so cold. It was windy. So Amani looks like you are probably a little bit warmer than me, right?
Hi, Lily. So glad
Yeah.
to see that you're having such a good time in Europe, enjoying yourself. It looks quite a bit colder there. It's quite nice here.
Yeah, I got a little bit cold too. Maybe you can tell my voice is different, but it doesn't matter. I always wanted to come to Scotland. It has been my childhood dream to travel the world. And when I read The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, I watched the movie Braveheart 2 times, 3 times, I don't know how many times. I just feel like this is my dream. I got to come to visit, Scotland, and if I can, look like a Scot, that'd be great. And the people even tell me it's the people who make Scotland a unique place. It's their spirit. So I feel like, today I can look and dress and identify like a Scottish. So, but it's so good to see you. I really want to thank you for an interview in Carolina last week when I was not available. And you ladies had a great conversation, and hopefully people will learn a lot from her PowerPoint and presentation. And today, and you and I wanted to talk about the psychological impact of mass indoctrination. And you are one of those immigrants who are most experienced, and also, saw from inside what it looked like, what it felt like, because you worked in China for propaganda department for 8 years. So I hope that people can draw their conclusion themselves by listening to our immigrant stories and kind of wake up and needs to ask questions, because even though I am overseas, but America is always on my mind. I keep in touch with people and keep up with the news, what's going on. So I'm never completely out. I'm always involved because I really love our new country. So thanks for joining me, even though we're pretty far away from each other, but we feel so close here,
Yeah. Thank you for joining me while you're all the way in another time zone. And speaking of Braveheart, it's one of my all-time favorite movies. I remember watching it when I was in college, and that was in 1990, late 1990s. And I remember the ending when the main character, the protagonist, when they told him to ask for mercy, and instead he called for freedom. I think that was the moment when I was very, very touched and realized, yes, like freedom is sweeter than life. I think that was a very inspiring movie for me, and I'm so glad that you're enjoying Scotland, where that movie was made and it was about.
Back to that movie, whenever first time when I watched it, and you had no idea what to expect. When he was yelling, screaming for freedom, took his last breath, all my tears just come down. It's like
mine too.
Yeah, it's just like it really shake your heart, and your soul, right? Nothing is more valuable than freedom.
Yeah.
So good news is that we are going to find that Braveheart movie shooting site. I think, that was, I think, in Scotland. So near the end of our trip, we're going to see where they shoot the Braveheart, and that would be very, very exciting. That's my dream to see that too. So, and I'm glad you saw that in China. And I told people we have lots of good movies. We're translating to Chinese or with subtitles. And in China, I saw Gone with the Wind. So I learned a little bit about Civil War. And but also I watched the Patriot movie, and after I came to America and Gladiator and all that, I just love epic and history movies. So I can learn more about the past and learn about especially the culture. I was not grew up in like a Western culture. Compared with the Chinese culture, all those years of control by Chinese Communist Party since 1949. That's really the only culture we knew about, except you and I learn from our families, our societies about ancient, old Chinese culture, which is different from the communism or foreign ideology. So actually, I learned more about Chinese culture history after I left China, because we're fed the government version of China history, right? And you probably know that better. So what do you learn about China history when you were even in school, since you're younger than me?
Yeah, when I was growing up, I mean, it's like, the typical, of China was suffering, the Chinese people were suffering from poverty, oppression, and imperialism from Western countries, and the corrupt Kuomintang, the Nationalist Party, which is a political party in Taiwan right now. And, the three mountains that was pressing down on the Chinese people, Sanzuo Dashan, right? The feudalism, the imperialism, and corrupt capitalism. So like, on paper that all made sense because, and they would show us all these pictures of China in the 20s and 30s, and people were so poor they were dressed in really worn out clothes and shoes, and back then there were many authors and writers and a lot of intellectuals too, like Mr. Lu Xun, for example. He would write about the realistic society, like, and a lot of people were poor and a lot of people were oppressed and angry. So because of that, it was, communism seemed very appealing and seemed very convincing. For example, my father himself, he was born about 11 years before communists to take over. By the time he was like a preteen, like when he was like 10 or 10 years old, his family was so poor that he had to drop out of school to help out his family, and he ended up working for a landlord who was like just happened to be a mean person, like who tried to cheat him out of his salary, tried to bully him, and tried to make him work very hard. So when communism came, and then when the People's Liberation Army came and told him, once you join us, what we're going to overthrow this entire system, we're going to bring down the oppressive class. You're gonna have whatever you want. You can have land. You can have property. You can do whatever you want with it. So when he was 15, like he was so enthusiastic, and he joined the People's Liberation Army immediately. So and he went to like fight the residue troops of Kuomintang back in Sichuan, in Liangshan area, in the mountainous area. Yeah, when he was 15, like he joined like he lied on his birth certificate to say that he was 16, so he could join the army. So like he became a very, very firm believer of Chairman Mao and the Communist Party, despite the fact that after the communists take over, he didn't get anything that he was promised. No land, no property. Even though he joined the land reform in 1950s, they brought down the landlord that bullied him. So he was like, very, very grateful to the Communist Party, because like he actually took his revenge, personal vendetta against the landlord who bullied him. They raided his house, they burned down his house, and
Wow.
executed him in the courtyard. And he was very proud. My father was very proud to be part of that. And but
So he
after
did not wake up. He did not even wake up after all that happened.
no, after he was proud to be part of that, because he believed that the landlords, they were bullies. They were rich. They bullied him. They were mean, so they deserved, what they got. But afterwards, he did not get anything that he was promised by the Communist Party. But that was okay to him. And after the land reform, the Great Leap Forward, and during the Cultural Revolution, he himself was actually sent to hard labor camp for 2 years, because he was still in the military, and he was like trusted with sending a letter from military leader to another military leader. So he delivered that letter, and turned out later the person who wrote the letter was labeled a counter-revolutionary and brought down. So because he delivered that letter, he was implicated as well. So he was labeled an accomplice to the counter-revolution military officer. So he was sent to a hard labor camp for 2 years. Because of that, he was in the hard labor camp, and he was listening to the Reds brainwashing. We call it the Reds brainwashing every day, 24/7, and had to basically reform his mind to become even more loyal to the party. So 2 years later, he came out and he became even more loyal to the party, to the people who persecuted him, who sent him to labor camp. So it's he told us all these stories, himself, and he was very proud of it. He's very loyal to, yeah, despite his personal suffering, he's extremely loyal to the party. So after Mao died and Deng Xiaoping took over and started the reform and opening economy, and his life became better. Like he actually came out of the military, got a job at a college, and started teaching and became a teacher. And he was appropriated an apartment where he can actually live with his family without having to share it with another family. So he was better off than most people, and he had food and clothes enough to to put on the table. Whereas under Mao, he often told us the story where he had to sell his only white shirt to buy eggs for my mother, who was pregnant with my brother at the time, and he had to sell his only watch to buy meat. And like during the Mao era, like he nearly starved to death. And but after Deng Xiaoping opened up China, we had
everything was good, right?
Everything was better.
Again,
yeah. But then he was bitter. Like when I talked to him when I became an adult, I would sometimes argue with him and say, so and so policy was Mao's policy was not good for the people, but people were starving. And he would get angry and he would yell at me and say, back then there were no crimes, and there was no corruption, and now look how much corruption there is. But I would tell him, okay, yeah, but what does that have anything to do with you? Your life is 100 times better. Look at your apartment now. You have 3 TV sets. You have like genuine leather sofa. And he would actually stop and say to himself, like under the breath, saying, yes, it would have been unimaginable back then. But then he would immediately check himself and face me and say, your thoughts have been corrupted. Your mind is rotten and has gone bad and has been corrupted by the capitalists, by the imperialists. And
so sad.
So I stopped talking to him like many years ago because I understood. I realize now it's like talking to a wall. It's like they do not face reality and they do not acknowledge reality. People like him, they're so brainwashed that they deny truth, they deny facts, they deny their own family members just to keep their belief alive. Like even though their own life has proven their belief to be wrong, they would not acknowledge it. And that's what I see here. It's starting to happen, and it's very, very scary.
Well, back to your father generation, it's not unusual for him to still think that way. And I have my own family members. My 3 uncles all were sent to countryside for 8, 10, 12 years during the Mao's Cultural Revolution. And some of them today, they still believe in the party. And one is still the Communist Party member and still sing Kumbaya, still be loyal. And I cannot talk to my family in China about what I'm doing here, about anything political, because they might disagree with me, or they might call me bad names. And I have extended family relatives ask me every year at when Mao had his birthday, even though it's dead a long time ago, 1976. I'm supposed to take a 1 minute silence to remember him. It is so sad, but I cannot talk to them online about it, and I don't want to get them into trouble. But you can see their mindset, their mentality. I used to go to China. You see people still buying mouse buttons, mouse little red books, and sing called the red songs, and they miss him. And now after Xi Jinping become powerful, and that kind of worship and supreme, like a Communist Party leadership, that kind of style is back. People are singing songs again, doing the dances, and read his little red book, Xi Jinping little red book, or download his little red app. I think of those generations, it's so difficult. Not to talk about in China. How about the ones in the United States, some 70s years old? You talk to them, they're still very patriotic. They're watching CCTV here every day and read the Chinese newspapers, and because they infiltrated into this country. So you and I, sometimes we feel so much in common. It's almost like we have family relative in China. We still think about them and we care for them, but we feel kind of like we really cannot talk to them about lots of things. It's like somehow we're kind of homeless at our spirit level, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what really worries me is that I start to see that happening here. It's like I've heard so many stories with especially young people who are brainwashed in colleges about Marxism and communism and how America is a systemic racist country. And I've heard so many stories where young people, who would like cut ties with their families, cut ties with their parents, and calling them racists simply because they disagree. And I've seen like personal experience. I've seen people around me who so got into this like social justice movement or the wokeism that they would literally like cut their own family members out and refuse to talk to them, refuse to hear anything different. and it deeply worries me because that is what happened in China and still happening in China. It's like family members cannot talk to each other, cannot communicate with each other. They cannot be honest with each other about their true opinions of current affairs and or events. Like many times they just discussions just turn into like recriminations. Like you label me, I label you, and then in the end everybody gets hurt. And that is a very, very concerning trend here because that does not. That's just what the communists love to see, right? Like they want to see family members turn on each other. They want to see friends turn on each other, husbands and wives hating each other. That's when they can swoop in and take all control. And I do believe that the mainstream media here is largely responsible for that.
Well, some are state media too. So so that when you see today's mass indoctrination in the United States, what kind of similarities in terms of tactics, methods, the channels they use are kind of similar, or maybe they learn from China Communist Party. What do you see the methods in terms of tactics? What kind of similarities you can tell?
Yeah. Well, the first one is that use the same labels for certain groups of people or certain individuals over and over and over again without providing any actual solid proof or evidence. For example, like I think I mentioned this before, back in China, whenever Dalai Lama is mentioned, he is always labeled as the anti-China separatist Dalai group, Dalai 集团. But like even when I was back in China, before I came to the United States, I kind of just believed that because that's all you hear every time that name is mentioned. It's followed by that label, separatist, anti-China group. So even if you don't know what evidence they have to support that claim, you start to connect, that kind of negative feeling with this person. So it becomes a physical reaction. Like as soon as you hear, I'm sure like even now, if you ask anybody inside China about Dalai Lama, they will immediately react as like, yeah, he's an anti-China separatist. But what did he actually say and do that make him a separatist? They never provide any details, any specific proof, and people don't ask for that proof either because it became an automatic response, like almost physically, for people to just think, yeah, Dalai Lama is a separatist.
Well, some Chinese in this country automatically also use same labeling. And when I interviewed Jennifer Zheng, who is a Falun Gong practitioner, and I have some even people tell me, hey, Falun Gong is a cult religion. It's like, is that what the Communist Party called them? It's like,
exactly.
Automatic response because you hear that all the time.
Every day, yeah. So it becomes physical, like it becomes a reflex. And I see that in the media here now, and I see the impact that it has on people. Like, for example, conservatives are racist, or white supremacist, Trump is a racist. Elon Musk is a hate speech enabler, or whatever. It's a and I've seen many articles that people, like some of my friends, have recommended me to read, and I was astounded by how they believe these articles to be actually objective. I'm like, for example, an article that gives you a title, that's nothing but an opinion on a person, for example, Elon Musk, like an opinion, like the headline would be like, Elon Musk is not the free speech warrior that he claims to be, for example. And then you go into the article itself, it's nothing but a simple dispute between a liberal company and the Twitter. And then, of course, they use all of these labels: anti-woke, county culture, right-wing, demagogues, like Elon Musk. And so it's like, I'm like, this was an article recommended to me by a friend who used to be extremely reasonable and rational. But when I read that, I said, this is exactly what I used to do at China Radio International. You give people a headline that is nothing but an opinion about a person. It doesn't even tell you what the event is about. So to create that impression, and then in the article, they gave you a few facts, some data, and mostly just opinion to back up their own headline.
What the source of article means? Like people got to know the source of the information. Some are not credible at all. Some are state media. Like people just like. But I have iPhone. When you click on news, they use the headlines, right? And we have immunity, so we just ignore them. We look at the headline; they're just so biased and so left leaning. And so I know where I'm going to look at my own source of news and information. But
Mhm.
most of people, like you said, you even think they're friends, but they don't think that way. They don't look at
Mhm.
source information. They just like to copy their rhetorics and their opinions and trying to even,
Mhm.
share that information with you. I mean, I don't know where the article is from, but people got to know your source of information if they're
Well,
credible or not.
mhm. Well, that source of information is from a private company, but a private media outlet. But that's for me, it's like the source of the information is not the important part. It's the way that they shaped their article to shape people's minds is
Hmm.
exactly the same that I was trained to do. It's like to give you an opinion first, and then use some facts and data. You take things out of context and to back up their opinion. And at the end of the article, once you reach the end, the reader will be like, oh, of course, yeah, of course, that this author, the writer of the article is right. That is called propaganda. That is how propaganda is made. Is to create that impression immediately and to enforce that impression with information that has been taken out of context. And yeah, it's like for me, it's like when some of my most trusted friends over the years would tell me these are the articles that they read to shape to support their opinion of certain people that they read about on the internet. It is very astounding to me because that just means like they are not thinking for themselves. They are taking somebody else's opinion and copy and paste and present it as their own opinion, and that is a very dangerous trend. People need to stop and think for themselves. When you see a headline like that, you need to know there is an agenda, a narrative behind this headline.
Right,
It's not to
right.
present you with the whole truth. It's to present you with what they think. So you need to stop and look at the facts and think for yourself.
But the people also have to understand in America, there is a free internet. You can Google, do lots of research. You can go to
Mhm.
Twitter. You can go to Citizen, independent journalists. But when you say some from private media or press, it does
Mhm.
not mean they're credible. Like
No.
if you read the CNN, New York Times all the time, and now like even the Elon Musk labeled NPR because they take some federal, take some public funding. So the government funding. So you also see Twitter files where the government collude with private companies do censorship. It's become very terrifying because when they get together to censor opinions, truth, dissenting voices. So the American people will be almost like the Chinese people inside of China. They don't know what is the truth anymore. But the
Mhm.
Chinese have a firewall to block them from access to internet. But in this country, you can still do your own research. You have access to internet, but people don't do it because their biggest block is their narrow mindedness. It's like
Mhm.
they don't challenge, they don't question. When
Mhm.
you have a conversation with some people, they're quite nice people, and they will
Mhm.
listen to me too, my stories and what I know. But otherwise, they just take whatever is from their source information.
Mhm.
It's a yeah, like you said that before. So we have some kind of immunity, but I just don't know how American becomes so not independent thinking anymore.
Yeah, I think people just really need to watch out. So, like, need to become more self-aware of that. So, like, when you see a headline, and you need to stop and ask: Is this headline misleading? Is this headline does it make you feel agitated? Does it make you feel? Does it invoke like negative feelings in you? I think that if that is a headline that evokes that kind of emotion in you, then you need to stop and maybe take a step back and look at it in a more objective way, because like that's in back in China, that's all we did. We all when we want to paint a certain group or a certain organization as the enemy of the people, we do that over and over and over again. We use labels, we use negative opinion pieces in the headlines all the time. So that becomes a matter of fact for a lot of people to just automatically accept, and that in
Hmm.
time it becomes almost like a cultish behavior. It's like when people hear a word or a name, they become so incensed, so angry and miserable when they hear, and they start their behavior starts to change. They start to treat their neighbors and family with such a negative attitude, and that is extremely dangerous because that
Hmm.
means the world that the media has created for the readers has become more real than the real world, than the
Hmm.
reality. I've
Right.
seen that happen. I've seen that happen to people who are actually pretty close to me, and it is astonishing to see the change in them, like the behavioral change and the attitude change towards their own family and their own friends. I think it's very, very alarming. Yeah, so people need to be aware of that.
What are some other similarities you see that between the two country indoctrination tactics? Do you say you probably know a lot about what's going on in our school system?
Yeah, that's another thing. Like like in one of our earlier episodes when we talked about my training from the education sector. When now right now I think the biggest thing is transgenderism, and I think it does it does concern me a lot because when I look back, and when I was a child, I grew up with boys around me. I had a brother, I had cousins, and my neighbors were all boys. I went through a phase like where I wanted to be a boy. Like I think it's just a very natural part of growing up. You like sometimes you want to be part of your community. Like my community just happened to be all boys. And that phase lasted a long time, like all the way into my early 20s, I would say. I want to show you a picture here. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
that's me, like climbing a mountain. That I was already in my 20s. I don't
Oh,
know how well you can see, but I had short hair. I was wearing the baseball cap backwards, and I was sitting on a rock in a very boyish pose. I mean, I look at this picture now, I cannot recognize myself. There's you know, I show it to my friends. They say that can't be you. That's like a total. That's a very tomboyish kid.
but adolescents going through puberty have identity crisis. They
Hmm.
trying to find out who they are, what they're like, and what the purpose in life. I mean, that's normal. That's normal. I mean, I remember I have a master's degree in social work, and we studied those called like stages of life. So each stage of human life has a major crisis. Like for example, when you're an infant, the biggest challenge crisis is learn how to trust the
Hmm.
human world. That's why
Hmm.
have a good family, surround yourself when you're babies by people who love you will make a difference later in your life. And secondly, when you become teenagers, the biggest crisis, the major challenges, and your identity. So it's very low. Like you feel like a tomboy, you want to experiment different things, you want to even
Hmm.
dress up, act like, which is fine. Can you imagine you cut your breast out? It's like when
Hmm.
you were teenagers.
That's what I wanted to say. It's like, when I was going through that phase, I was lucky that this was in China. Nobody cared, and nobody would have suggested, hey, you can actually have a gender transition surgery, because I might have gone for it, and then that would have ruined my life. That would mean, like, I deny myself, like I'm not accepting who I am. And as I got older, I this is how I look now. Like I'm so happy I never I never continued. That phase ended after I was like 22, I think 22, 23.
Hmm.
Because this is who I am. I am like, I went through some phases, but that doesn't mean those phases should be encouraged to last forever. And I see that trend here, and it's very concerning. It's like teenagers, who are experimenting or a little confused, or going through phases or changes, physical changes, who just need a little bit of guidance, and who need a little bit of care and love, and to help them go through that. But instead, they're being exploited. They're being used to advance certain transgenderism agenda. And like I've seen, I think I mentioned it to you earlier. I've seen this video of like high schools or middle schools and even public libraries organizing drag queen shows for little kids. That is just like it is perverted. I have to say it is so sickening to me, because that's like using the adolescents, using people's unstable and transitional physical growth phase to advance their own agenda. I think that is something very, very wrong with it. That is very wrong.
What did the chairman Mao say when it comes to gender? You mentioned to me that
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah, I think back then when Chairman Mao took power, that's um yeah, can you see my screen?
yes, that's great. Like the
Yeah.
time is different now. Man, woman,
Men
all are the
are the
same.
same. Yeah, so that's what Chairman Mao wanted. Like you can see these posters back then, they were so popular. They were everywhere. There's mom and dads, a mom and dad. You can't even tell which one is which. I can tell this is mom and this is dad. But in here, like all the women looking like men. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and it's that just reminds me, that's just completely resonates what's going on today, here in America with this transgenderism that they're pushing on young children. They're trying to obscure the difference between men and women. And that's exactly the tactic that Mao used. The goal is simple: it's to destroy families. Once families are broken, you have a whole generation of children who grow up to be angry, insecure, depressed. So they are so much easier to control and organize and be recruited to fight for the cause. That's what happened to the Red Guards generation. So yeah, this
Right.
whole thing truly concerns me. And I look back at, for example, at my own picture, and I think, wow, what horrifying experience it would have been if I was exploited by someone during that phase.
Well, when I was in school, girls were basically canceled.
Hmm.
Um, we had approved hairstyle, clothing, colors, and also forbidden to date, forbidden to talk about romantic love, and forbidden to look sexy, or you cannot even use that word, to look feminine,
Hmm.
because now trying to create a genderless society.
Hmm.
Every individual is the same. Yeah, equity, right? Equity. Everybody's same. Every individual is same, and you all turn into his loyal regards at time. So,
Hmm.
so girls were dressed look like boys and wear same colors, the same similar hairstyle, and no makeups, look plain. We couldn't afford the makeup anyway, and then no romantic love. So, and the names for husband wife, you cannot call each other husband wife. You call each other comrades. So everybody's a comrade. My male comrade, female comrade.
Yeah.
It just, I think that's why we feel this is not right. This is some kind of similarity agenda is being pushed here. Of
Hmm.
course, in the Communist Manifesto, destroy nuclear family is one of their goals. And how do you destroy nuclear families? You turn, like Mao did, you turn kids against families.
Hmm.
And he separate people into black families and red families. And the kids who hated their black class families, they want to change their last names. They want to they choose to come out denounce their black families so they can become red again. So it's all for greater good. Whatever the greater good the party, the supreme leader want them to believe. So don't you feel worried? You see our kids today, young kids, college students, even high school students, they're being weaponized and trained as
Yeah.
basically like a red guards.
Yeah, definitely. It's like that's what like most recently I've seen all these videos where the like drag queen story hour, which is like I think like even maybe 5 or 6 years ago would have been unimaginable. Like if parents knew what was going on back then, this would be outrageous. Like all the mainstream media would be condemning it, but now it's becoming more and more of the social norm, and I think people are starting to accept it. Like all the signatures with the pronouns, in business professional emails, like from schools, from hospitals, like I get these professional emails. There's always a pronoun like behind their signature, and it's like people are getting used to it. Now it's starting to become the new norm. So and so identifies as this, identifies as that, and I think it's time we really start to push back. Ignoring it is not going to make it go away. It's like for me, I would say next time if someone says to me, do you identify as an Asian? I would be like, no, I am Asian. Do I identify as a woman? No, I am a woman. I take offense when you say I identify as a woman because I am a woman.
I think in the past, when people were peacefully coexisting, no mandates, no push down on children into schools. If
Hmm.
you're gay, if you're trans, you're adult, I can be respectful. I can be nice we can all be nice to each other,
Hmm.
and watch something together or drink in the bar together. That's fine. I have no problem with that. Live. It's only when they start to become activists, push for government policies and the public fundings, and also trying to keep secrets from parents. Now parental rights are being marginalized. And like in New Hampshire, Manchester school district, the mom sued the school for keeping secrets from her because her daughter used different pronouns, so who knows what else she did. And the court says, your parental rights stop when you send your kids to public school. And recently they said, you know, if you don't want to be lied to by public school, then take your kids out. It's like they even don't care. But
Yeah.
our working class like us, immigrants, parents like us, they don't have a means to send their kids to private school or homeschool because they have to work. And so how is that working out for so-called the poor people, the immigrants, minority family? They claim to support. I think today's Democrat Party has gone insane, and they are taking over, hijacked by the progressive and the Marxist group. Because I have lots of nice Democrat friends. I just feel like but we don't recognize our
Yeah.
party anymore. Like we're the still regular, moderate, old blue dog Democrat, like a Kennedy Democrat, right? And
Yeah.
today is like we don't recognize it. But the thing is, though, still most people don't know the truth, include parents. Can you imagine if parents know about this? Like your kid, like for example, Washington State said if your kid is 13, can transition without parental consent. And then there's another state says if you don't approve your kid to transition, the child protection service can take your children away.
It's becoming like just unbelievable at this point. You know, it's I've heard stories where people got reported to child protection service for the most trivial matters. Like for example, a father who was like at the swimming pool and kind of just dozing off and taking a very short 5-minute nap or something, and got reported to CPS because they were worried that a 5-minute nap could be neglected and the children could drown. But it's like people see, instead of stepping up there and wake up the dad and say, hey, maybe you should keep an eye out for your children, they report on him and behind his back to CPS. So it's like this culture of reporting on each other instead of confronting each other to their faces is extremely worrying, because that means people don't trust each other and people assume the worst in each other. They would rather trust the authorities than trusting the fellow parents. I think people like need to, like, especially parents, like I understand sometimes they're so concerned. They see they're worried for the safety of the child, but first step is to communicate with the parents face to face yourself. We need to bring that culture back: honest communication, straightforward face to face human communication, instead of going behind somebody's back and report them to the government, because that's what people do in China. So if we don't want this to become China, instead, like a lot of people, young people here, they admire Chinese government, they admire the Chinese Communist Party. They say they have done grand feats, they have achieved great achievements. Just imagine if the Chinese Communist Party come here to rule your life, how would you like it? Right? So yeah, so if you don't want that, we all need to step up and bring back the actual American culture.
But the sense of when you actually need the child protection services, like the minors, even trans kids, to perform drag queen shows in front of men on those sexualization like app, what are the phone calls to call child protection service? This is a child bill. Come here. How come those kids are excluded from the protection? They are not legally able to consent. They are minors. You cannot, in Colorado now, you cannot even buy a shotgun at age until you are 21. Right? Used to be 18 to buy shotgun, but now they have 4 gun control bills passed, signed by the governor. So they raised the age limit to 21 for any guns and a whole bunch of gun control laws. But you can consent to change your gender, change your pronouns, and have surgery done permanently, damage yourself. And it's irreversible damages, permanent damages. And where is the protection? Where is parental guidance? It's like when we used to take our kids to movie. You cannot take your kids to a movie theater for some rated R, right? It has ratings. But today, everything is thrown out the window because there is a push from the federal government, from the White House, to call the transgender affirmation care with the federal tax dollars. It's insane. It's insane. And I'm just surprised so many parents still haven't activated to organize protests, to go to their, like in New Hampshire, show up to school board meetings. And I think some are waking up. That's why you see more and more lawsuits, and we're waiting to pass this parental bill of rights. But they call that book banning. See, that's another label you were talking about. If you have a question about age inappropriate books in your school libraries, you're Nazis. You want to ban books.
Yeah, they call you book burners.
Everybody can ask a question about school curriculum as taxpayers, as parents. Age inappropriate books to indoctrinate kids. Some are really heavy in pornography. And like in New Hampshire, one school called the Queer Theory, it's lots of pornography. And the father lost when he appeared to school. The book still stay in the public school library. But we were the one who have questions. What called book banning? It's like Florida don't say gay bill. Did they read the bill? Entire bill did not mention gay's name. It's a parental rights bill. So they control the words, but they are believers, voters, and they just buy into that. They just, oh, I'm Democrat, I'm a Democrat activist, or I'm transgender activist, so I'm just gonna go repeat major mainstream media, corporate media want them to believe and to say, instead of actually looking into it,
Yeah, that goes back to what we were talking about, like at the beginning of this episode. It's like people have been kind of like, because they're exposed to this kind of narrative every day, over and over and over again, they become an automatic response. It becomes like they don't look for proof of what they read anymore. They don't look for evidence for what the accusation is against the other party anymore. They just accept it as a matter of course, and that is done through, day in and day out. So like Chairman Mao says, we must talk about politics every year, every month, every week, every hour, and every minute. Like for example, like I love listening to Colorado Public Radio's classical channel. I love classical music, and when I drive, I listen to them every day. So that's several times a day. So recently, starting from this year, there is a political theme every month. Like it started from Black History Month, which has been a tradition. I had no problem with that. And then March became Women's History Month. So as soon as the music stops, they start to talk about women's history. And it became like, because it's like, every 5 minutes, every 6 minutes, they start to talk about women's history, women's rights, this and that. And it became very repetitive and very tiresome. And then I thought, March has passed. I thought that they'll be done with it, right? And then now it's April, and now it's climate pledge weeks. And climate pledge, like as soon as the music stops, they start to talk about climate change. And now it's Asian and Pacific Islanders Heritage Month. So it's like that you can't even enjoy some music in peace without them injecting all this identity politics into your ears, like into your brain. So like for me, that's what I used to do back in China, in the radio. Like you play some piece of music and then you talk about, what your beliefs are, what your politics are, what all your opinions are, to make that imprint on people's brain over and over again. And this is like, it becomes such an instinctive tactic that I can clearly recognize, and it just concerns me deeply. And I hope, like as someone who has been in the Chinese propaganda sector, I want to really just say to the people who are running these shows, people who are running these media outlets, like, do you truly believe you're doing a good thing? Do you truly believe this is like the way to convince people of your cause? Because it might work short term, but in the long term, people are going to get tired of it. Like for me,
right.
It's so exhausting. Nobody wants to hear about your cause as 24/7. Really, I just want to enjoy some music, and please just give me music.
Hey, silence. Remember, silence is violence. You got to be actively anti-racist. Maybe pretty soon you got to be actively anti, like this or that. It just, but it's ridiculous. For the people still say, well, for women's rights, but they don't want to use woman. What is a woman? Cannot identify woman. Also, if you really want to stand up for women, stand up for girls' sports right now. At the Biden vetoed the bill passed by the Republican in the U.S. House to protect women's sports. Biological men have advantages in all the sports they get into with girls, with women. All that years of progress. And the same though, this this woman, like swimming leader, was even assaulted because she speaks up. They give her bad names. They try to assault her, and some transgender activists are becoming increasingly violent. They kind of it's terrifying to see, because the red guards, sometimes the most vicious, most thuggish ones become to the leader of the red guards. Then they become specially protected groups by Mao, by the party, so they have a license to hurt, to injure, to assault people without consequences. It's like we have two different kind of justice system now.
Totally,
one is for the people on the right and conservatives. One is for their own kind. Can people say that clearly? It's weaponize children and weaponize the federal agencies and control the media, control all the propaganda machines. We have seen that before, Amani. Sounds scarily familiar, right?
Yeah. So I really think it's time for every concerned parents to speak up and keep a close eye on your children and stand up for their rights, stand up for your own rights, because once it's gone, it would never come back.
Right. And I feel like for the past 30 years, I've been here almost 35 years now, I have never seen America this in crisis at the crossroads, that we are come close to lose the America we came here for. That's why we have this show. I hope that we are making impact. And I want to thank you, Amani. You are very courageous, like other immigrants, and who basically volunteered to do this to help me. And but we really feel like this is our mission. This is our calling. Who else are you going to wait to come here to save us, to keep America free? We have to do our part. We are American citizens now. This is where our children are going to have their future and the grandchildren. Imagine what kind of country they were living in. And you are very experienced in propaganda, so I hope we will keep our conversations going and encourage other immigrants to join us. You can give your last few words and to say that what else you want to tell my audience to follow us.
Not much. Just if our audience is like our show, and so if they would like to step forward and talk about their stories or talk about what they're concerned about, and just leave us a comment under the video and like and share. And Lily is our a leader here. She's she's the inspiring power for all of us to step up, speak up, and do our part.
I would say I'm an accidental activist. I feel like I have to do this, but if you like this video, please share and please tell people about us. If you want to support us, since we're not really, monetized at all, then go to locals.com. You can become a member, give us $5 a month. We will really appreciate that. There's a payment system set up, and you can just give $5 a month automatically by signing up. And thank you so much, and we really appreciate your continued support to keep this program going. Good to see you all night here, Amani.
You too. Thank you, Lily. Have a good time in Scotland.
I will. I'm gonna get more Scottish spirit here, fighting for freedom like the Braveheart did. You take care of yourself and your family. I will talk soon. Bye.
Bye.